Hello, everyone. Greetings. My name is Elizabeth Philippe, and I am the Senior Manager for Global Impact and Inclusion at UNFCU. I want to wish everyone a happy UN Day around the world. A big day. UNFCU founded closely by this date on October 22nd, but really just a great day all around to celebrate so many the impacts of the United Nations, especially what's going on now, which is the pursuit of the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as the SDGs. So we'll be tying in that theme. Our topic really has been focused on inclusivity today, and this is a key aspect of our discussion on supplier diversity. So we're going to be diving in to a really engaging conversation with experts from our UN community, as well as a great practitioner. We at the United Nations Federal Credit Union focus a lot on bringing people together through this network of credit unions and their leagues and associations. It's great to share best practices and ideas and to learn from each other, to learn from our experts. So we're in today for just a wealth of information and knowledge sharing, and so grateful for everybody's participation. My colleague, Tom Kurian, who is the first Vice President of Enterprise Information Security at UNFCU. He also serves as the lead on our industry team in the Global Sustainability Program. Tom will be facilitating our discussion. We'll focus on the collective action as well that's taken place in this space to drive positive change. So Tom, over to you, and happy UN Day.
Happy UN Day to you, Liz. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. We are really pleased to highlight this topic, which underscores that intersection of social justice and climate adaptation. As Liz mentioned, we have great representatives from our UN community and from the private sector. And today we have from UNOPS, who provides infrastructure procurement and project management services that support the achievement of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals around the world. We're pleased to connect online with Rasmus Hansen, Sustainability Supply Chains Team Manager at UN City in Copenhagen. Hello, Rasmus, can you hear us all right? We appreciate your time at this late hour. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Also joining us virtually is Yolanda Saito, Co-CEO and Director of Partnerships and Innovation at Impacti, is also lending her voice to discussion. Having collaborated with many institutions, I believe also with UNOPS, she's no stranger to our summit and our work here at UIS. Hello, Yolanda, can you hear us?
Yes. Thanks, Tom. Hello, everyone.
Hello. And joining us in person today, Anna Falth, who leads Women Empowerment Principles and the Secretariat within the UN Women, has even more to impart on WEP's tools and resources and what we can avail from them as a group. Good afternoon. Well, everyone, let's continue to level set on our insights and on sustainability practices in the supply chain, emphasizing today on the integration of diversity and inclusion, and how we as organizations, as credit unions, can leverage our purchasing decisions, our policies and practices to promote gender equality and support larger social and economic progress through these responsive measures and at various stages and at tiers, especially engaging with our partners. I think I was just mentioning to Anna when we were off mic, we have some key truths at UNFCU when we started engaging our supply chain. One of them is, if you want to see an organization's values, show me their budget, right? Where are they actually allocating their resources versus what they save is important to them. And another one, of course, when engaging your supply chain and your organization is measuring their own decisions, right? They're not disassociated from your supply chain. These are really a reflection on your own allocation of resources. So with that, I guess we'll start with the how through gender responsive measures and other at various stages of the supply chain, how we engage with this topic. I guess I'll start with Rasmus. Can you describe an important part of this process and how you internalize and socialize the work of engaging your supply chain on these issues to advance DEI and other CSR initiatives?
Yes, thank you, Tom, for the question. And I'm sorry I cannot be there in person. I hope you'll accept my virtual self instead. I mean, as you can imagine, it's tricky, right? Just a little bit of background. UNOPS is a very decentralized organization with offices in more than 80 countries. And this is where most things such as procurement are handled. And procurement for us represents a huge opportunity for addressing diversity and inclusion. And I think this is the same for anyone doing procurement and engaging suppliers. We handle procurement for between $1.5–2 billion a year. And we want to ensure that when we spend this money, that we also affect diversity and inclusion, both through shaping the market in the right direction, but also by setting requirements and by working with the suppliers. And I think you can categorize our approach into 3 different categories. We have training, both sort of online and in person, specific for procurement people, but also for the rest of our colleagues who are sort of relevant in these kind of projects. And basically to introduce them to the topic, to familiarize them with diversity and inclusion. We also have specific guidance and tools that can help our colleagues address diversity and inclusion in procurement and guiding them to what would be relevant based both on the type of procurement they're doing, but also the product or services. This also includes specific supply diversity guidelines that we're actually working on right now as we speak. I had some meetings earlier today. Where we're updating them at the moment, and our vision actually, our ambition is to have this as a public document at some point. But lastly, and I think this is the most important part, is that we build alliances with people in our projects and with sort of the internal stakeholders that we have. Sometimes we're lucky that we have diversity and inclusion specialists in the project that we involve, and we target them specifically, as they usually both have an interest in driving this, but also can provide local advice on the best path forward. But the idea is to have other people on site that can drive this forward. So it's not just with the procurement people, but we have experts on site who can really take this on. I think this is more or less our approach.
You know, that's really important, and it really much aligns with what we've seen, that you have to engage and get buy-in. In fact, we do that first at UNFCU. We engage with our internal owners, project managers, the vendor owners, before we even begin engaging suppliers, just to ensure that they're aligned with us and that they're communicating the same message, they understand the value prop. So I think that's really important in this process. Anna, how are you doing? You know, I think this is a topic internally I know we're discussing that's important when we're tackling this topic, which is when you're thinking about specifically, this is, I think, very pertinent in the diversity and conversation, is sort of how you are weighing your supplier base based on their ownership. You know, is there more of a focus on, hey, diversifying the kind of supplier base based on their beneficial ownership versus maybe the way their management is encouraging women empowerment or diversity within their internal operations?
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, very good question. This is something that we have explored for quite a while, for a few years. Personally, I am leading an initiative with the Women's Empowerment Principle. So we work very closely with the private sector and listen to them and also try to understand what works and what doesn't. And our ultimate objective is to advance gender equality as UN Women. And there are many ways that you can do that. Just to make the point that currently is estimated that it will take about 300 years to achieve gender equality. So this timeline that we're on for the SDGs by 2030, we are just 6 years away from that. So we need to find systemic solutions, ecosystem kind of solution. And the supply chain has been kind of positioned as the way to do that. And that means that the approach that we have taken is twofold. One is about the diversity, and currently women entrepreneurs or women-owned business, they get less than 5% of procurement opportunities. So there is a systemic issue here, whether it is access to finance, to finance the purchase orders, or other issues that need to be tackled from that perspective. But the one track is to look at the diversity and look at women-owned business having more opportunities. The other approach is to look at companies that are driving gender equality. So if you imagine you have your suppliers, if they can drive gender equality because they are supplying to you, and maybe their suppliers in turn are doing the same, we will be able to achieve more. I mean, not more, gender equality is not quantifiable, but you will have more progress on gender equality if we are holding the whole ecosystem to account. So that means that the one track is focusing on women-owned, and just because you're a women-owned business doesn't mean that you understand gender equality either. So the ultimate situation would be to have women-owned business driving gender equality. So we are here with our initiative, and I can talk a little bit more about it later, what the Women's Empowerment Principles are about. But basically, it is to make sure that every person that is in charge of a company is driving gender equality in the workplace, in the marketplace, and in the community as well, and is kind of in tune to these issues. And as you mentioned before, the budget shows where your values lay. And today it's very important. In 5 years, Gen Z will be 40% of clients. And we know that Gen Z are very driven by the ethics and fairness and justice. And I just say that this is to get ahead of the curve, is to start working on this dual track already now, because it is coming, whether through regulations, whether through investors that are interested in this topic, or the client base and the employees. Because Gen Z will also be a big part of the employees that expect a company or a bank in this case to drive gender equality inside and outside the company.
Yeah, that's a really great point. You know, here at U.S. credit unions, I'm sure international cooperatives, you know, we're very interested in engaging younger consumers, acquiring high talent. So having women empowerment, adopting these principles, you know, could be both an attractor on both fronts, from the workforce side and from a membership side into joining cooperatives. Do you see that there's uptick specifically in the financial services, or any trends in the financial services sector in engaging with young women and in this topic?
I wish I could come here with talking about the major trends. Unfortunately, we are not yet there yet. But there is actually quite an interest. I was just mentioning to you earlier, we had a webinar this morning, and the question from one of the participants was, you didn't cover the supply chain. Where are the how-tos in the supply chain? So there is a really strong interest, and there is a movement. We've been working with some companies and helping them with the supplier code of conduct. We are in the process of looking at how do you assess your suppliers? What are the criteria to assess your suppliers beyond the ownership? But some companies, particularly bigger ones, have come to us and say, we can't find women entrepreneurs that supply in the quantity and the bulk that we need. What can we do? And then we are saying, but you need to then look at your suppliers to assure that you are aligning your values. And we have some examples, not necessarily in the banking and finance institutions, but we see from manufacturers that they are making a dent in this area. We see also legislation that is more about tracing who your suppliers are, knowing your counterpart, knowing who you're aligning your business with, because there's a big risk of not doing that. If we can see in the news that there are this supplier of this big company had human rights-based abuses or other, and it's a big risk for an organization not to know what their suppliers are doing. So it is a movement in the right direction, that I can say. We have some of our web signatories that have aligned all of the first-tier suppliers to be web signatories. It's not the full extent that needs to happen, but it's a beginning. So that's the kind of the first to make sure that all of the suppliers are committed to gender equality, and then you can go to the second or third tier depending on what business you're in and what you're doing.
Well, you've said so much I want to speak on, but I will say that, we do also provide, well, I'll probably speak in a few minutes about our own process internally, but we do also provide our supplier code of conduct. It's an important document. I'd love to have you take a look at it at some point. But moving on, Yolanda, partnerships can propel the best and most efficient and robust way for supplier diversity. Are there some examples of Impacti's work in collaborating with stakeholders to improve their supplier diversity? Can you talk about some of your partnerships with maybe larger institutions? Well, we'll answer that first, and then we'll talk about some of the.
And now, following up on what Anna said there, that power of turning away the focus from one KPI, which is just women-owned businesses, to actually finding suppliers that align with values. And this is it. We've been working we've had conversation with procurement teams, dozens of them in different countries, working with the World Bank, the United Nations. And really two concepts come out from, really what Rasmus is saying, what Anna is saying, that supply diversity is about one, values, and two, partnerships. And what do we mean by values? We see that often when you think about supply diversity, when we first approach procurement teams, we often get resistance, actually, because they say, look, it's just about lowest cost. We can't do this. But immediately, the fact is, both in the public and private sector, procurement practices have shifted away from just lowest cost to delivering what we call value for money. But the question always comes up, what does that actually mean, value for money, right? Many of the procurers we go to just say, yeah, just give us a technical criteria, let us just check off something and we'll do it. And, that's how we'll get a sustainable supply chain. Well, we always bring the conversation back to values, because ultimately supplier diversity programs are about defining what values you as an organization stand for, and then integrating those values into purchasing decisions. And that makes it less technical, but a lot more motivating. Credit unions are skilled at this. They're value-based operations. That's core of what you do. It's about people helping people, social responsibility, meeting community needs. Those are all credit union values, and supplier diversity programs just offers credit unions another means to live those values. And that's where that second concept comes in, the one you asked about, Tom, on partnerships. Many procurers think that supplier diversity are top-down, where you, the buyer, tell them, the supplier, what they have to do better. But we often just try to turn the head on that because it's a wrong way to go about it. We've often found the problem is you as a buyer, you don't know what the best way is to make the best social and environmental impact. So take the pressure off. The best supplier programs that we have seen from the groups we work with are led by institutions that express their values clearly. What is it that you want to achieve, and seek partnerships and ideas from their supply chain on how to meet them. So there's three major shifts that we're seeing. Like one, it's not about being prescriptive. It's not about penalties for bad suppliers. It's about setting values and then finding willing suppliers to align with them and propose solutions. They often know better than you how to solve that problem. Two, it's not about requiring perfection on day one from suppliers. It's about setting that commitment together and then continuous improvement. And then three, it's not about expecting every supplier to do the same thing at the same rate, but ensuring everyone's doing their part and moving forward towards these common goals and values in a partnership model.
So I don't know, Yolanda, if you could see my visual responses to everything you're saying, because it's so resonating with me, exactly what you said. I will now just take the privilege of talking a little bit about UNFCU's process, and then I'll come back to you and ask you some follow-up questions. But you said some things that we found to be absolutely true, right? That it's really about partnership. And in fact, UNFCU, we, as I mentioned, all of our suppliers have access to our code of conduct, but our material suppliers, we're engaging with a survey that it's based on the UN Global Compact's Action Manager questionnaire. We kind of looked at that as our kind of a source to make sure we're asking the right questions. But what we found is that not only after we surveyed them, often just the process began a deeper partnership. We began to see that those suppliers who were aligning with us on values, really we expanded and had a way deeper partnership with them. In fact, some of them are either part of UIS right now. Some of them are sponsoring events at the summit, because they could see the values alignment and what a deeper relationship it was, and kind of innovating on products. One of our, I'm going too far afield, but one of our partners is talking about like, hey, how can we credit unions issue payment cards, credit cards, debit cards, right? And how could, maybe we're a potential candidate for a more sustainable kind of credit card, right? Just in terms of the plastics used or the materials used. So you're definitely, I could go on, but no one wants to hear from me. Can you tell us a little bit? I know you mentioned some larger institutions. And sometimes I think credit unions think this might be kind of a large topic. This is only really about manufacturers. We don't have factories, right? But sometimes, can you tell us about how the work you're doing with larger institutions or organizations? I know you work with UNOPS, I think, as well. How that may filter down to and apply to credit unions, and if you also want to talk a little bit about the collaboration with UNOPS too, if that's something you can share with us.
Yeah, sorry, Tom, was that for me?
Yeah, that was just a follow-up for you, just in terms of like the work that you've done. You mentioned a couple of larger institutions. Does that kind of, how are you seeing anything in that your work or like what's happening in terms of regulation or anything that may kind of either trickle down or be applicable to credit unions in the future?
Yeah, I think exactly just those two principles that were before, that with every institution, no matter how big or small, it's about creating that community based on values and partnerships. There's challenges coming up, and I know you have a challenge question going. So I will save my answer for that lesson learned over here, but I just want to start with that positive message that it isn't as hard as you think it will be, and it's not as technical as you think it can be. So echoing kind of what everyone has said here.
Perfect. Rasmus, I know UNOPS has been frequently recognized for its innovative approach for advancing sustainable procurement through its UNOPS Possibilities program. In fact, by supporting supplier diversity and helping micro and small and medium-sized enterprises, UNOPS has been credited with unlocking the potential to become successful entrepreneurs. What are the secrets? Do you have any secrets you could share? Any possibilities to suggest that may scale for credit unions?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it is something we're really proud of. And honestly, I think the key is really to listen to the suppliers and understand what their blockers are. Part of this, our UNOPS Possibilities program, is that we hold different kind of supply events, both for us to bring in new suppliers, but also to talk about the UN procurement process. And it is more exciting than it sounds like initially. But before each of these events, we survey the participants to actually understand what their blockers are. So why are they not be able to participate? Sort of how can we tailor this program to ensure that they can participate in the future? Sort of what's missing here. And actually also building on what Anna said before is like one of the examples that we sometimes bring in financial institutions because some of it is that the lack of credit or lack of access to credit. So we can bring in financial institutions that also get to understand and see, okay, what's our problem procurement? What can they work with? They can bring their perspective and kind of pitch their case as well to the suppliers. And the key part is that they also get to network with the prospective suppliers and you have this mutual understanding. So what we do is really to tailor these events to the specific audiences that we know are also able to deliver on upcoming procurements. So basically, we're not wasting the time. If we have an infrastructure program or project, then of course we bring in construction companies or someone who's in this industry already. And it really just have to be relevant for the audience, right? And we try to tailor these programs for either micro, small, medium enterprises. Some of them are for women-owned businesses or youth-owned businesses to make sure that we can also address this audience in the right way. And actually, we've previously co-hosted with some of our great colleagues from UN Women, specifically with women-owned businesses, where we had this specific gender and diversity focus. So for us, really, the key is to try to tailor the event and understand what's blocking and how can we sort of help move this forward and actually make sure that they're equipped to work with us in the future, both on bidding on our upcoming procurement, but also becoming suppliers to the UN in general.
You know, it's funny, in our previous session in our main room, we were discussing how credit unions should get involved in their local communities through those local organizations. And hearing you speak makes me think, oh, you know, credit unions maybe working with a local, maybe it's a local chamber of commerce, but maybe there may be like a women-owned, like entrepreneurial group in the area, in their community, you know, engaging with them, maybe being the source of credit, right? You know, I know credit unions are always interested in expanding their business, but maybe working through these community organizations that may be themselves trying to, you know, connect and network women and maybe diverse supplier bases as well. But since you brought it up, Anna, I will turn it to Anna as well. From a credit union perspective, are there ways credit unions can access or assess their progress on these topics through women empowerment principles tools? Are there ways we can use those tools?
Yes, and I actually have 2 slides on this to help illustrate a little bit how those tools look like. And I thought also it would be an opportunity to just put on the screen what these women's empowerment principles are about. It has like 5 pillars. The corporate leadership is key. So being a signatory requires the CEO to be the signatory. Signing on to this commitment, and we've seen that this is really making a big difference when the top leadership is on board with this agenda. And they cover workplace, marketplace, and community. And of course, very, very important is the transparency and reporting that fosters accountability throughout the organization. Today we have 10,000 companies that have joined us, representing about 30 million employees. This is far from where we want to be, considering that there are 350 million companies in the world. But it is a beginning, and by them focusing on Principle 5 is about the supply chain and kind of foster that inclusiveness. On the next slide, we have some relevant tools. We have one general tool that is called, it's not on this slide, but it's called the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool. So this is for all of you to kind of go in and assess you more generally about gender equality, where you stand. But then because of the pressure of companies now trying to understand what do we do, we also have an assessment tool for gender responsive procurement. And guidance that comes with it, what that means. And we have a number of case studies as well. Not yet from the financial institutions, but from other industries, and I think it's can be easily applicable. What we do with these tools is to kind of assess an organization. It's a self-assessment. So you go in there yourself and use these tools, and you will kind of be classified in 4 different groups. Which is the beginner, improver, achiever, and leader. And I can say, and that's why your question about the major trends earlier, the assessment that we've done so far, most of the companies is in the beginner and achiever. Beginner and improver. So we are not there yet, but this tool is a good starting point to really understand. What I wanted to mention also, one of our web signatories, they started with, and I'm following up a little bit what you were talking about, Rasmus, on the supplier capacity building and training. It's so important. So they made it a goal to focus on women-owned business. They wanted more women-owned business, specifically from agriculture sector. And they said it was very challenging in the beginning because the women didn't have the finance, they didn't understand how to go into the process of tendering. But basically they were saying now when they have a full-fledged program corporately, they say that it's a win-win. So there might be some struggle in the beginning to get them on board and really build that capacity. And then now it's kind of part of bread and butter for the company. That sourcing is naturally coming with a supplier diversity approach and also from the gender equality perspective. But I hope for those that haven't joined us, UNFCU is a web signatory. Others that would like to join, we welcome you, and also we're happy to guide you through the process.
Thank you, Liz. I was very glad to find out. I was like, oh my, I'm like, did we? And of course. But I'm super happy to hear that. But I definitely, I heard, what was it? A long time ago, yes. So one thing I heard that was very true, and I've heard it multiple times, which was a couple things, right? Top-down leadership, leadership really driving that. The partnership, and I think Yolanda even mentioned like the kind of continual improvement, right? That's something that it's actually really important, right? That when you do these assessments of yourself, of your supply chain, it's not a permanent set. It's an anticipation of continuous improvement, of wanting to go, to improve. I think when we approach our supply chain, we're very clear. We're not like, grading you you can't do business with us if you don't have some threshold score you meet. It's more about, hey, we want to understand where how we're operating, and we would, if you improve yourself, you're actually you're helping UNFCU achieve our goals, right? So it reinforces that partnership of not being like punitive, like minimum threshold, but more, hey, know where you are, know where we are. Can you help us achieve more by raising your level? And also, I think you also mentioned, again, this kind of providing the tools. I know as credit unions, this is a big thing, maybe providing capital to small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, perhaps, that may need access to capital to get their small business started. And we just heard in that last panel about a training program in Hawaii, right, about helping train contractors to address cesspools, which is a requirement by local regulation. So again, all working in coalition. But you also did mention challenges, right? So I guess we do have to talk about it. It's not all positive growth. I think it generally trends that direction. But how does, when we think about this supplier diversity and getting greater accountability, what shifts have you seen? Sorry, I didn't lose my own pride here. In the advent of recent social justice moves in the country and making progress toward gender equity, Yolanda, does Impacti help shape the conversation on supplier corporate social responsibility, and what challenges have you overcome along the way in working with credit unions and other financial institutions in kind of driving this work? You're on mute.
Thanks. Now, Tom, that's a great question. One of the challenges that we've seen in working with organizations and credit unions is that struggle of whether to focus on social or environmental impact. I know we're here to talk about supplier diversity, but when engaging suppliers, there's often a win-win situation to look at both. So we know credit unions have they're great at social impact. But often when we get into environmental impact, this is sort of seen as outside of the scope of their values. But when you're talking about these trends, social justice movements, I think just climate change is becoming something that can no longer be ignored. Communities that credit unions serves are feeling those impacts of extreme weather events and facing higher fuel costs, limited insurance coverage. And it's those low-income communities that are least capable of adaptation to these changes. So it's becoming an issue of environmental and social justice that credit unions do need to champion, potentially also in their supply chains. But how to do that? One way that we've seen success is credit unions that actually focus on three things. They say we are going to have a local, circular, and inclusive supply chain. And it means that you're able to achieve both social and environmental goals at the same time. Some examples we've seen just concretely in the credit union context. It's something as simple as saying, okay, instead of buying cell phones outright from a global IT company, let's talk about Samsung or an iPhone, can you instead lease these mobile phones on a service contract from a local community group that offers refurbished phones, repair services, that creates local jobs, while at the same time extending the lifespan of those phones? Another credit union we saw was actually engaging local companies to repair, repurpose, and resell their kind of used office furniture, event banners, other things that would be waste like glass, from their offices and branches. In Seattle, I think, Tom, you were mentioning, are we looking out to see if there's business groups that we can work with? And in Seattle, BCU actively works with the Seattle Good Business Network that supports both social and green businesses on circular economy entrepreneurship programs that look at how we can reuse waste as upcycled materials. But then a second challenge that comes up often, resistance, is that inability to show the impact of making these inclusive decisions. And that's where kind of measurement comes in. Right now, we're operating in a culture of greenwashing accusations and some growing skepticism about ESG in general. But I'd say the reaction from this ESG backlash shouldn't be to stop altogether. It should be to do it better, right? So it's important for credit unions when they start these supply chain initiatives to be able to think right from the start, how are we going to show the impact of choosing more diverse and environmentally responsible suppliers? And this means, and as Anu was saying, how many more women-owned businesses are in your supply chain? But beyond that, the other things that are in the women empowerment principles, how have you actually improved their economic opportunity? How have you spread that culture of values across the workplace? And then on the environmental side, this can be measurements in carbon emission reductions, waste diversion. And luckily, there's a lot of good impact measurement methodologies and technology tools, none perfect, but all progressing. And it's an area that we work really closely on, because to overcome that challenge of do we start if it's going to actually turn out to be a risk? And measurement is key.
Yeah, a perfect segue. I know we're running a little short on time, so I will ask, but that was a really great kind of segue into the next part of our conversation, which are about resources and tools. And Anna, I know UN Women continually develops resources, webinars. Are these accessible to anyone, credit unions?
Yes. So thanks for that question. So all of our webinars and most of our tools are accessible to the public. We do send out invitations to those that are web signatories. So you will be more up to date with what's happening. If you are a signatory, you will get the invitation, but you can also access all of these things on our website, webs.org. Some of the resources we have dedicated to web signatories only.
That's
but no
fantastic.
charge.
No charge, absolutely. Rasmus, anything that UNOPS makes available that credit unions could take advantage of?
Yes, I would love to plug our Supplier Resource Center that we built actually a year ago. We launched it first, and we're sort of continuously building out resources for suppliers. Some of it is very basic, sort of just going through the UN procurement process, which can be quite complex. But we also have a focus on different kind of sustainability areas, of course, including diversity and inclusion. The materials are focused on small and medium enterprises, but we hope there's something in there for everyone, basically. And we are adding more resources continuously, and we're hoping also to have a fresh overhaul next year, early next year.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely share all of those links through either after the seminar, through our website, uisnetwork.org. And Yolanda, I know Impacti recently launched some benchmarking tools. Can you tell us about the way for credit unions to guide, the way that these credit unions can use these guides to examine the opportunities for sustainability, staff engagement, philanthropy, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, the genesis of this came out because often when we work with credit unions, we often find the hardest part is, deciding where to start. And many credit unions are doing a great job already in the areas of philanthropy and staff volunteerism. And that's something to be proud of because, sustainability really is driven from the bottom up in credit unions. But we have seen recently in stakeholder consultations we're doing and materiality assessments, there's now pressure for credit unions to go beyond that and really integrate sustainability in the financial products and services they do, like low interest green loans. I think yesterday we had a session with BECU about the green member experience and drafting that, all about attracting millennial and Gen Z generations. We also know the pressure on possibly climate disclosure with the new California law that's coming in. It won't affect credit unions directly right now because it's targeted at larger financial institutions and companies, but the momentum is there. So what this kind of benchmarking tool, or we'll say self-assessment tool, is intended to kind of just make the point that there's a bunch of different entry points if the credit unions really want to advance on sustainability. We talked about supply chains here today, but Tom, you listed off kind of the other areas that could be in there, and allow each credit union to decide where they think they want to move forward in a way that explores the different action areas, but also keeps them aligned with how they're measuring up against peers.
That's wonderful, Yolanda. And Anna, obviously, WEPS is providing guidance to industries across all sectors. How can other credit unions join UNFCU in becoming a signatory to WEP?
It's a very simple process. If you have your CEO on board, I think that is the first step, is to make sure that the leadership team is on board on this and to get that signature from the CEO. Once the CEO is made that commitment, which is like a document that needs to be signed off, it's a simple online application and which we review and accept in about 2 weeks. So it's a very simple process, but it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's just the beginning of the journey.
And again, as you noted, once becoming accepted, you will also proactively be getting the links to these resources and tools that are available. Fantastic. Exactly. I encourage all our credit unions to join. And Rasmus, last week, UNOPS and United States Department of State announced an expansion of the Global Climate Action Partnership aimed at accelerating global efforts in climate action. Another great example of partnerships goals. Is there any component of this that would support this sort of supplier diversity work?
Yes, it's a partnership we're really excited about. And this one is specifically focused on grants for small organizations to sort of help them address climate change. And for us, we're really trying to work with different kind of approaches, also addressing climate change with suppliers. And it's basically that we talk with them, whenever we talk with suppliers, we address climate change, right? And it's both one-on-one when we do inspections or engagements or these kind of supply events I was talking about before. And this approach is really focused on climate adaptation. So what suppliers can do to ensure that their business, products, services are adaptable or can be adapted to the effects of climate change. And really the reason is that adaptation focuses that we often work with smaller businesses, organizations where, I mean, in terms of mitigation, they have little impact, but at least we should discuss and engage with them on how they can actually adapt to this changing environment.
That's fantastic. And I think we only have a moment left, but just to close up, I'll pose it this way. Anna, are you optimistic about achieving the goals, and why or why not?
Yes. I'm very optimistic because I think when we established the WEPS in 2010, you could see from the principles, we have 7. There are 3 that focus on workplace and 1 on marketplace, principle 5. And that was because at that time we were far from addressing these social environmental issues in the supply chain. Today, this is becoming one of the most important ones because many organizations are already on track on the workplace, But what is missing is the marketplace. And we get a lot of questions, which makes me very hopeful.
That's fantastic. I actually will reword it then slightly. Anna, Yolanda, what makes you optimistic about the work you're doing? Let me put it that way instead.
I would simply say that, just hearing from Rasmus and Anna today, it sounds like this is something that any credit union can and should be doing, because the tools are out there, the support is out there, and it just aligns with credit union values and helps them become, have a market differentiator from the typical financial institution out there. So it's something to leverage and such an opportunity for credit unions to take on.
And Rasmus, I'll give you the final word on this one. What makes you optimistic about this work?
I think the progress we've made, like we've had some incredible projects in probably some of the most difficult contexts you can imagine in basically on our planet, with women-owned businesses, with engaging on them, with training them, and with having them win procurement through our organization. So it's possible anywhere. And I would also just echo what Anna says about the web tool. It's an incredible tool, and it's such a good starting point if you want to understand where you are as an organization. We actually use it in some of our procurement as well, even as a requirement that they have to take it and have to do the self-assessment, even if they don't act on it. But at least they've taken it, understood where the organization is. So also a last plug for this. It's a great tool.
Wow, that's fantastic. Again, I think you guys have all maybe encouraged. I will say, just to your point there by the Rasmus, we have another little thing at UNFCU, what you measure improves, right? So just by taking the assessment, all of a sudden, once you measure something, it tends to improve, right? So that's true of many metrics. But again, and I do think we can, especially when it comes to gender equity and many of our kind of goals, we can achieve that. I think especially working with our supply base and our partners to help us achieve those goals. I think that partnership is important. So again, thank you speaking. It was great to speak with all of you. Thank you, Yolanda, Rasmus, Anna. Thank you so much for being with us today and bringing us to speed and providing all these tools. And again, encourage everyone to take advantage. We'll give all the links, but if you can also can Google it or look for it on the internet for the Women Empowerment Principles.